we'll just say a warm welcome to Andrew, who's going to judge our open competition tonight. So without any further ado, we'll hand it over to you, Andrew.
Thank you very much. Ta. Let me see. First thing, let me make sure I can share my screen. Hopefully,
Yep.
You can see that. I'll hide the sidebar. Right. Is that okay for everybody?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Great, good. Now, firstly, thank you for inviting me back in a virtual way. It's good to see you. I've tried to approach things in the usual way, and what I've actually done is, just for Rob's benefit, is I've the images that I want to leave till last, I've taken out of order, okay, so, and put them at the back. Is that okay, Rob?
Fine. Just let me know what each one's called then, so I can mark it on the sheet for the.
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, of course I will. Yeah. Okay, good. Right. The other thing that I should start off with, which I usually start off with when I'm doing judging, is I just want to stress that it's not my intention to offend anybody. And these opinions the opinions I express are obviously my own opinions, and it can be subjective, but I'm trying to be as objective as possible. And what I've done is I've tried to tease out what I think are the salient points to give you some idea as to why I've scored them in the way that I have scored them. A few of the images I've also had a go at in Photoshop and made some adjustments just to illustrate some of the points that I'm making. Okay, and I'm quite happy if anybody wants to sort of chip in and ask questions as we go along. Feel free. Okay. Right. So the first one we're looking at, image number one, is looking for nectar, and they're tricky blighters to try and photograph bees. I've tried a number of times with varying degrees of success because they do busy themselves. But what I've learned is the best thing to do is to concentrate on maybe a single flower and wait for them to come to you rather than chase them. But the other thing is you don't get very long in order to take the photograph. Now, this image was taken at 1/500th of a second, f7.1, ISO 800. So 500th of a second is probably the minimum you want to be using to take a photograph of the bee. But one of the problems that we've got here with this particular image is the focal plane is obviously the most important thing, in my opinion, as far as trying to take a photograph of a bee is concerned, is the head and the mouth parts. You want to see actually what it's up to. And obviously, and if you look carefully, you can see that there are elements of the body that are in focus, but the head is away from us. You can't really see it. It's out of focus. So unfortunately, it doesn't really succeed. So this one I've given 12 points.
And that's Christopher Calders.
Okay. Now image number two I'm saving to the end. So that's Pop. I'm saving that one to the end.
Okay.
So hopefully I can move to the next slide. And there we go. Reflections during lockdown. I mean, well done for getting out there with the camera and taking images. And the reflections themselves are nice enough. But I find my eye searching for somewhere to settle. The sky's not particularly interesting. It's not really being very helpful, unfortunately. So overall, the image kind of lacks a bit of impact, and I'm looking really for what the main subject is, and also wondering where it was taken. I'm guessing it could have been something like Canary Wharf, but I'm not sure if there are that many sort of brick buildings in Canary Wharf.
It's in York, Andrew.
Is it? Oh, right. Okay. Right. So, yeah, it was taken at f8, 1/160th of a second. It just lacks a little bit of impact for me. So I'm only scoring it 12 points.
And that's obviously Graham's.
The next one, the tidal pool, I'm going to miss out to the end. So what you're looking at now is number 5, the Falls. Very competently taken shot and competently composed with front to back sharpness. Maybe for my liking, just a fraction too warm. The water flows nicely through the image, starts on the top left and ends at the bottom right. And I can't help but feel that, therefore, in this instance, the vignetting that's been applied is perhaps a little bit overdone, because I do want to see the water disappearing at the bottom and at the top left. Clearly, the photographers had to wrestle a bit with that sky as well. I don't have information on the I haven't got the data, the metadata on this particular subject, but obviously a long exposure. And the problem with trying to knock back the sky like that is that, again, it can appear just slightly too false, just marginally false. You can see that we've got the sun peeping in the corner there, which is the reason why the photographer felt the need to do that. But it's a well composed, nice, competent image, sharp in all the places it needs to be. I'm giving that one 16 points.
And that's Dave Wilkinson's.
The next one is Halt Whistle. This is a 6-second shot at f8, ISO 100, and I'm assuming that the 6-second exposure was needed because perhaps the water was flowing quite gently and needed to be a longish exposure. But that aperture of f8 has kind of slightly compromised the depth of field. And of course, there's also the risk that if there's a breeze, you're going to get a lot of leaves looking very blurred, and that can be the case more in the background. And in the foreground, I think perhaps because it's sheltered for 6 seconds, those leaves are nice, quite nice and sharp. It's a nice shot. It's very verdant, isn't it? I do like the full green color, but I'm not that crazy about. Well, the footbridge is okay, but it's all right. The footbridge is okay. A little bit boring. The foreground, though, isn't particularly strong. And I'm wondering if it might have been better to actually take the shot at f11 to guarantee a better depth of field. You could still take it at 6 seconds if you up the ISO to 200 rather than 100. So I'm giving this one 15 points.
That's Stephen Ruddock's.
Now, this has grown on me each time I've returned to it to look at it, because I think I mentioned before that in reviewing the images, I go through them at least 3, if not 4 times. Firstly, for initial impact, and then again, study them much more closely. And every time I return to this one, like I said, it grows on me. What it lacks in having like a main subject, a focal point, it makes up for in the sort of symmetry of the shot and the nice crystal clear reflections. The colors are a nice autumn brown hue. And we've even got symmetry in the banks in the foreground at the bottom of the image. But I wonder if they actually interfere slightly with the shot, and whether it might have been better if it was possible to take the shot without the banks creeping into the corner and concentrating much more on the pure reflection nature of the photograph and the symmetry. The sky's quite nice as well. That was a 1/5 of a second at f18, and I'm giving this one 15 points.
That's Mike Elwood's.
Okay, the next one, which should be number 8, Thirlmere in the Frost, and it's I mean, it's a lovely scene, quite a hard frost close to the water, and I find myself concentrating much more on the water itself and the immediate sort of bank, and that lovely boathouse that you can see on the right hand side. And I'm wondering if it might have been better if it was possible to make more of that and the reflections rather than include more of what's above, because I do find that I mean, I quite like the houses on the left, but the white house more in the center does take my eye quite a bit. So I think that compositionally it could be improved. I'm wondering also if it was handheld, because it was taken at 1/110th of a second, f7.1, ISO 800, which seems to be quite high, and you wouldn't need that if you were using a tripod, of course. So I mean, I like it. It's quite a nice scene. I quite like the shape, and I'm awarding this one 16 points.
That's Andy Rags.
Okay, moving on. The next one, number 9, is sunflowers. I've got a soft spot for sunflowers. Whenever I go to France, I try and coincide it, if possible, with the Tour de France and also with the time when the sunflowers are out, which is usually sometime in July. But the shot is somewhat spoilt by, well, the sunflowers aren't really playing ball and got their heads up into the sun. It's looking a little cluttered. And sunflowers either lend themselves to lovely repetition in terms of patterns, or in this case, what you want to concentrate on is 1 or 2 sunflowers which kind of like are the star of the show. But it's not really composed well enough in order to emphasize that. Like I said, the heads are a bit messy, they overlap, so it doesn't really work for me, unfortunately. So I'm only awarding this one 12 points.
So was that 12?
12.
Yeah, thank you. That's Derek Knights.
Number 10 is Elterwater. Fairly successful, but it does lack a little bit of punch and impact. And I think what's happened here is that the sun has kind of rather bleached the colors out of the mid to background. Yeah, the sky and the hills seem rather washed out. The foreground has possibly been lightened at the expense of the background, because I do like the reeds in the foreground and they're nice and sharp, but perhaps the exposure needs knocking back in the hills, and find some way of bringing the colors out more. So it's one that probably just needed a bit more work on Photoshop to try and retrieve what I'm sure the photographer saw that made them want to take the shot in the first place, but it's slightly bleached out, and I think it's a shame because it could have got a higher score. This was the 20th of a second at f18, incidentally. So it did have real potential, but I'm giving it 14 points.
And that's Mike Elwoods.
Number 11 and number 12, that's Flamborough Sunrise and the Seagrass, I'm leaving till later. So now we get the Lovers. I mean, initially I wasn't sure what I was looking at, and I thought it might actually be a glass ornament that had been produced in that sense, and I realized no, it's not. It's obviously been created by the effect of water and perhaps dropping something in the water. So I'm assuming it's a shape that's been captured by that, and it just happened to have happens to give the appearance of a couple who are entwined. But it doesn't really work for me. And whilst I like the use of the black background, the lighting ends up creating something that reminds me rather of a garish glass ornament that my mother used to keep on the mantelpiece. It's a bit too random for me, so I'm giving this one 13 points.
And that's mine.
The next one, here's looking at you. This is 1/600th of a second, f6.4. Okay, so I'm just trying to think what the photographer is trying to achieve. The title of the images here is looking at you, so I can only assume it's referring to the woman that I think has maybe just glanced up and thought, what's he doing with his camera? So I'm not sure that's what her expression is. I find that it's rather cluttered, and it's neither a shot of the fountain, which is lost against the vegetation, nor really a street scene shot, interesting shot of people, because mainly they've got their backs to us. I'm somewhat distracted by the chap who's got the writing on his t-shirt, and also the red flowers. I'm assuming that this was taken in Lanzarote, because I zoomed in to see what was on that sign at the of the shop that's just there. So it was taken in December, so maybe it could be Lanzarote. There's a band playing in the background, and it might have been more interesting to actually think of taking some photographs of them performing and people enjoying that, rather than what we're presented with. So I'm only giving this one 11 points.
And that's Derek's.
Right. The next one is a challenge. I've tried these sorts of shots myself, where you've got a dominant color and you've got a bright sun illuminating vegetation, because it's a real challenge with light and shade to try and capture it, try and get the exposure spot on. So it's quite a tricky shot, especially if you've had to climb up a steep hill. And it's a challenge to get that dynamic range spot on. It's quite a good attempt, but you're up against it when you're using an ISO of 3200. It's taken at 1/850th of a second at f10, so you've got the depth of field. So I'm wondering why it was taken at 3200, and it could be that there was no tripod handy, because the photographer couldn't be bothered to lug it up the hill. It's another one of those shots where my eye is struggling to find somewhere to rest in the scene, and I think it's a shame that there is not something that's perhaps a bit more interesting in the foreground. But I appreciate it's a tricky shot, and I'm giving this one 14 points.
That's Andy Rags.
Right, and the next one, honeysuckle flowers. A hard subject to get right at a macro level, because you are going to struggle with all those different flowers branching off. And I'm not sure it's best presented anyway in landscape mode. But there's not really enough care gone into trying to get the depth of field right in order to represent this particular flower, because the flowers that are nearest to us are out of focus, and it kind of spoils the shot. I think the only way of really tackling something like this, if it's a kind of a studio setting, which I'm assuming it could be, is to use focus stacking. The reason why I'm not sure whether it's studio shot is because it was taken at ISO. The ISO is 800, f10. So yeah, you're giving yourself the best chance, but when you're close up, f10 isn't really going to be good enough to get everything in focus that needs to be in focus. Taken at 1/250th of a second. So ISO 800, not sure why. 12 points for this one.
That's Christopher Calder.
Right, we should now be on to number 17, Dandelion. Is that right,
Yep,
Rob?
that's it, yeah.
Okay, good. this is a somewhat more successful macro shot, concentrating on the complexity of the innards of the flower to create something a bit more sort of abstract. I'm guessing it could be handheld. 1/125th of a second at f8, ISO 320, which is a shame if it is handheld and not use a tripod, because it could have been improved. The exposure's okay, but it does appear somewhat over sharpened. Those stamens look slightly over sharpened to me, which kind of spoils the shot a little bit. So I'm giving this one 14 points.
And that is Stephen Muddocks.
Number 18, Patagonia Peaks. Quite a nice image. The blue cast that's created by the color temperature of the shadows, and also reflection of the blue sky, give it a sense of what it's like to be there. And there are certainly some impressive peaks, which you'd expect to see in Patagonia, of course. But there's not really a strong focal point for the subject, and certainly no drama in the sky. So it lacks that bit of punch that I'd be looking for in a photograph like this. And without wishing to be rude, it kind of reminds me more of a postcard shot. I mean, it's good that we get some detail in those shadows, but there's not sufficient subject interest to really grab me. And it would have been nice, for instance, if there had been a vessel. How much nicer it would be if there'd been a vessel in the water, placed perhaps on a third, just to give it that little bit of extra interest. Taken at f10, 1/400th of a second. So it's a nice enough shot, but it just doesn't quite have the impact that I would like it to have for somewhere so special like Patagonia. So 14 points for that one.
And that's Graham's.
Right, the next one, number 19, is Walking Off Bowscale Fell. So I can see the intention. I can see what the photographer is doing here, using the leading line of the path to take us into the landscape image. But unfortunately, it doesn't really take us anywhere of particular interest, or that's strong enough, I feel, to kind of do it that much justice. And we've got nothing of any foreground interest at all. The path itself is not particularly photogenic. The exposure's good. The sky's good. But overall, again, it's another one of those shots that lacks a bit of impact. And I'd have preferred that little tree on the right-hand side not to be clipped as well, if I'm being really, really fussy. 1/125th of a second, f10, ISO 200. But so just like the last one, it's just not doing it for me. I'm giving this one 13 points.
Sorry, that's Stephen Muddocks.
Then we move on to number 20, which is Coal Boiler, RIP. This was taken 2 seconds, 2 seconds exposure, f13. And anyone that knows me knows that I do like a bit of urban or industrial decay, but I'm not a great fan of HDR if I think maybe it's been pushed a little bit too far. There's a bit too much structure, which makes it look a bit false. And I like the shadows to look like shadows in a scene where I expect to see it in a shot like this inside. And I think the thing that's been compromised, because it lends itself to black and white photography. I think that's fine, but I think the thing that's been lost is we've lost the impact of those rays that are coming through the window at the top right corner. Otherwise, the exposure's pretty good. So that maybe the composition also could have been improved by possibly moving slightly to the left. Now, I do realize it may depend upon the access that you perhaps had to get into this room, if indeed you were in the room and not poking your camera through a window. But the space on the bottom right is a bit negative, and it might have been nice to perhaps move to the left, or I'm not quite sure whether it's a small ladder that I can see in the bottom right hand corner. But I feel like it needed a bit more going on in the foreground to make it a more successful shot. So I'm giving that one 14 points.
And that's Dave's. And yeah, you can get in all over that. It's that's Driffield Camp, because I know, because I've been there with Trish.
Right.
Getting all over there. It's an abandoned RAF camp. It is urban exploring and it is trespassing, and I did get bollocked by the wife quite a lot, especially seeing as it's now hired out by a company called Airsoft. And while you're in there, Dave will know that they all of a sudden go around shooting each other. So you have to hide from security and the people shooting each other. So yeah, it's good fun. But
right.
Yeah,
okay.
It's not far off Driffield Centre.
Right. Okay. Good for you. Okay. So presumably then there's an awful lot more to see then than just.
Me and Trish we went around it for about 5 hours, and we only probably saw about a quarter of it.
Wow.
Quarter to a half of it.
Right.
We didn't go in every building. There's lots there. There's a huge amount there.
Right.
I'm up for it one day, Andrew, if you're interested.
Sorry?
I'm up for it one day if you're interested.
Oh, count me in, yeah.
Yeah.
I can send. I think I've already sent Tim how to get into it and where to get into it and where the fences are down and stuff like that.
Right.
But once you get into it, it's all open. It's just an abandoned military camp that's been trashed.
Right. Okay.
So,
I used to be the camp adjutant there.
Oh, right. I better behave then.
No, we'll bring you with us.
apparently in the back there is a mural of the Vulcan bomber that has been left intact, but I haven't found it yet.
All right. Okay. Well, it's definitely worth exploring.
Yeah. Oh, it is. It's well worth a go there.
Right. Okay.
We were also asking for planning permission for it as well.
Yeah.
So if you
go now
rather than later.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for that. Moving on. Number 21. Nostalgia for a pre-COVID era. I'm going to have to confess to not being too sure how to score this one. As a composition, I'm not so keen on the arrangement of the elements that make up the picture, but perhaps I should judge it in terms of how well it tells the story rather than anything else. But I do find the man coming out of the shop, who I assume was needed to help tell the story, the COVID story. I find him in the wrong place and somewhat distracting, where he is just above the woman that is leaning against the wall, and I'm assuming that she is the motorcyclist. I mean, it's a super motorcycle, and so you got another sense of nostalgia in the image. It'd be better if the rider, I felt, looked older than she is. Give it that greater sense, but the image itself is rather busy because of all the signage and what have you. So it really doesn't succeed, unfortunately. I don't feel, and I'm going to give it 13 points.
And that's Graham's.
And I'm sorry once again to sound negative. I hope I don't come across too negative tonight, because I actually think that from my scoring, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I do think the standard has been higher tonight, and I think I've got higher marks for more images tonight compared with previously. But I do find I just don't find the subject itself particularly appealing or strong enough to create the impact I think the photographer wants. The bridge itself, the swing bridge itself, isn't particularly attractive. I don't find it particularly attractive, and that's doubled by the fact that, of course, you've got a strong reflection in the water, and I'm assuming that maybe it's a reflection is the reason why the photographer took the image. So that the whiteness of that bridge really grabs the eye, and the brickwork's not particularly interesting. The sky, unfortunately, also isn't being terribly helpful and interesting. So unfortunately for me, it doesn't really work. So I'm giving it 12 points.
And that's Mike Elwoods.
Sorry, how many points was that, Andrew?
I think 12. I said. I think
12. Thank you.
Yep. Right, number 23 is this one. Fast Falls the Eventide. A shot with real potential, because I mean, again, it's a personal thing, but I've got a real weakness for old and abandoned boats, as well as buildings, as well as barns, as well as I think I need professional help, actually. I mean, if you know me, you know that I'm really keen on going places like Dungeness because of the abandoned boats that you see there. So I mean, I certainly feel this has got potential, but I can't help feeling that there's some manipulation of this image that means it kind of lacks that bit of tonal depth that you need. And I suspect the effort it's as a result of the effort to get the detail out of the shadows in the boat itself, which is lovely. The sky is quite interesting, but some of the composition's not quite to my liking. We're all kind of almost in the boat, and I don't know if it would have been possible to pull back a little bit to show it a bit more in context and to see a bit more of the landscape. But I mean, that might have been difficult. It might have been difficult. But
would have been in the water, Andrew.
Right. Okay. But what troubles me a little bit is it's shot at f5, so we're asking for trouble in terms of the depth of field. So anyway, I'm giving this one 14 points.
And that's Andy Rags.
Number 24. Quite a nice composition, placing the stones in the foreground. I didn't mean to accuse you of actually literally picking up the stones and placing them in the foreground, but obviously trying to find the position so they appear in the foreground. And you've got this veil that's traversing the picture. But again, this is, if the metadata is correct, this was shot at f5, 1/320th of a second. So I'm wondering why you're not giving yourself the best chance in terms of depth of field, which it needs for the eye to wander off along that veil to the background, where unfortunately we've not got a particularly interesting sky, which is a shame. The light is somewhat not really terribly helpful, a bit kind of a bit uninteresting, bright but uninteresting, and perhaps those stones exposure could be knocked back just a fraction, so they don't dominate the foreground quite as much as they do. So I'm awarding this one 14 points.
And that's Derek's.
Number 25. This is a better, what I assume is as a studio shot with water in it. The metadata says that no flash involved, so I can only assume that the flash was independent of the camera and therefore didn't record it. It's certainly a better studio shot, stop action shot, and I prefer the color of this as well. It's not as busy. It's, you know where you've got to look, and the most important thing is that splash itself in the water. Not quite sure what caused the flash. I'd be interested to know. So there's an attention to detail that's required with a shot like this, because you find yourself inspecting that splash. It's a shame that there is spilt water, which is a bit of a distraction. I'm assuming perhaps from previous attempts in order to get it right. And there are marks on the glass as well, which I know it's a bind, but you really do need to almost like clean the glass every time you attempt to do it. So it kind of detracts from the image. And also perhaps fairly tightly cropped, perhaps too tight at the top, not sure. 14 points for this one.
That was mine, and I wasn't cleaning that glass 600 times.
Okay. Okay, fair enough. And the next one, number 26, Bishop Wilton at twilight. And it's not a bad twilight shot at all. And I can see what the attraction is because you've got that mist that's starting to settle. And also not too grainy, considering that the ISO setting was 3200, taken at 1/13 of a second, f2.8. So that's intriguing for me because if it's a 13th of a second, perhaps it was on a tripod. If it was on a tripod, why 3200 ISO? Unless, of course, there's a really good stabilizer built in. So the K1, which is the camera that was used to take this shot, obviously, performs very well under those sorts of circumstances. The spire is nicely on a third. But it would have been nicer, wouldn't it, if you've actually could have got the spire coming out of the mist itself, but it was, what it was at the time, and I appreciate that. Can't help but feeling that the composition could have been better if it was possible. And again, I don't know what the focal length was of the lens, whether it was actually possible to get closer in, because the more I came back to this picture and inspected it, I felt that the really interesting stuff is going on around here, around this portion of the image. And I wonder whether perhaps it might have been a better image if it was possible to get closer in. Certainly the K1 should be able to cope with that resolution. So I actually tried cropping it just to see what it would look like, taking it closer in, and also that lighter sky, which keeps taking my eye, because the lightest point of the image will often distract you and take your eye. So I thought, well, why not perhaps take that out if it doesn't really add to the shot, because the interesting thing is the mist that surrounds the village. So I felt it certainly could be improved upon. So I'm giving that one 15 points.
That's Chris Calder's.
Now the next one I'm saving till later, and also the one after that. So we're on to number 29 now.
Yeah, that's fine.
Dedicated winter paddleboarder, and of course Tim knows I've got to make a confession because I was with him or close to him at the time that he was taking the photograph. So I know that it's one of Tim's shots, and a well executed shot to freeze the action, really sharp. I do like the paddleboarder silhouetted, kind of silhouetted. I realize it's not a proper silhouette against the color of the sea, which provides a great backdrop when you've got the full height that encapsulates the paddleboarder, and you've got that spray detail as well, because the shot was taken at 1/1250th of a second at f5.6 ISO 400. My only gripe, I suppose, really is that I would prefer it, and I did have a look at mine to see if it was possible, and I know it's tricky, would have preferred it if there was a bit more room to the left of the paddleboarder that he's moving into. And I think you could have got away with placing then the paddleboarder in the center, more in the center of the shot, because what's more at the third then is that lovely sprayed, that lovely track of the surf, where he's come down the surf, which is interesting in its own right. So I think that probably would have worked. So that's why I gave this one 16 points.
And obviously that's Tim's.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say something, Andrew.
Yeah.
There is more space on the left. The reason that I did this, the reason that because it is a crop, because obviously it was sky and there was whatever. The reason I did this, I wanted to keep him on the bottom third quarter, if you like, the bottom left point, close to. But I didn't just want to cut off the stream of bubbles where it'd come down.
Oh no, absolutely not.
I wanted to show, the point at which he'd broken the over
Yeah,
the top.
no, you're
Oh,
absolutely
okay.
right to, yeah, absolutely right to keep those, the stream of bubbles as he came down, which would have turned it more into a more letterbox shape.
Yes,
You-
yeah, but
if
it was
you've got the room on the left.
a conscious decision not to put him in the middle. So
Right.
I'll try
Okay.
again with him in the middle, but
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, it's subjective. Yeah. Okay.
thanks.
Next one is number 30. I know I've got form now, haven't I, with these? It doesn't do it for me, I'm afraid. Aesthetically, the shape that's created, it doesn't really hold my attention. I find it a bit too random and just doesn't, unfortunately, appeal. So this is a 2-second shot, F22. So Fun with Water gets 12 points, I'm afraid.
I think that was only 3 different drops at milliseconds apart and 1 flash.
Right. What is the arc?
Where's the arc? That's a bubble. That is literally a bubble that it is dropped through. So the liquid in the in the reservoir underneath is bubble liquid.
Right.
I used a straw to blow a big bubble, and then the drop liquid, which is in a dropper that sits above it.
Right.
And you can drop up to 3 drops with millisecond delays between them. You can adjust the size and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Also has the bubble liquid in it, but to make it more viscous, you use guar gum.
Oh, right. Okay.
To make it a bit more viscous, or milk or something like that, which is how it gets that like the translucent bit.
Right.
Which means that the drops actually pass through the bubble. So
Okay.
the
Right.
line that you see is actually the like the oil marks that you get on a bubble.
Right. Right.
So yeah, it takes a lot of work to actually, and it really does take a lot of work to do. Because Tim's got the same setup, and he'll tell you it's a pain in the ass.
Persevere.
Yeah, I do it in the garage, so it is completely dark because it's so quick that you have to 1/8,000th of a second wouldn't capture it. You have to use the lowest flash power, like 1/28th, which will give you somewhere in the region of about a 1/20,000th of a second flash duration.
Yeah,
that's what freezes the shapes that you get.
Yeah. I knew it had to be the flash that did that.
Yeah,
certainly.
Yeah, so literally you get one drop that comes down and makes the tower that comes up.
Yeah.
Then another drop comes down and hits the top of the tower to make the circle at the top.
Right, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine. Then. Not everyone's cup of tea. It's fine.
I blame lockdown for this.
I did it on the first lockdown, actually. And do you know what? It's one of those things that you get really, really into it, and then I haven't picked it up for about 2 months because I've just been too busy with other shit at home.
Okay. Right. Okay, moving on. Blue Door, number 31. This could have worked better perhaps with a more interesting, older, rustic door. The lock looks quite modern, and whilst it benefits from the fact that the window is open, the shutter of the window is open. The wall is rather grey and dull, so there's a kind of a white balance issue going on here, and needs to be a bit whiter and speak more of summer in the Mediterranean, and also that the floor, that grey floor, wants tidying up a little bit as well. In fact, what I did was I didn't work on the floor, but I just thought I'd have a go at just altering the exposure, the white balance a bit, just to give it a bit more punch, so you can see the difference. So Blue Door gets 13 points.
And that is Derek's.
Number 32, Butter Wouldn't Melt. This is tonight's first moment. A straight-on portrait of a kitten, lots of detail, and it works fine in black and white. I quite like it. It's got a strong vignette, possibly to remove the distractions around the kitten. I mean, it works well in black and white. I'm not sure if there isn't a bit of color in the eyes, in which case I think that's a good thing. And it might have been a good idea to perhaps try and make sure you draw that out, because I think that might have helped to give it a bit of more punch, is to preserve the color in the eyes of the kitten, just to contrast with the black and white. So it's very competently done. Exposure is good. Lot of fine detail. Maybe a bit tightly cropped. I don't know why. Perhaps we couldn't see a little bit more around. And I possibly also would have perhaps preferred it if it was a shot of a kitten that was playing with something, to give it a bit more personality, like playing with a ball of string or something like that. But as a straight on portrait, it's very competent, very nicely done. 16 points.
That's Andy Rags.
Blue Reflection. Can't get too excited about this one. The exposure is very nicely done, is spot on. And whilst everything is sort of well controlled to avoid any unwanted reflections and so on, it's ended up being a little bit sort of nondescript, and it is what it is, but also a bit rather dull and a bit grey. Again, I've just adjusted it slightly just to give it a little bit more sort of contrast, just so you can sort of see the difference. So again, there might be a slight white balance issue there, which is easily sorted with a raw file. This is 1/6 of a second at f16. But if you wanted a nice shot of some blue liquid in a glass, it's fine. It is what it is. So 13 points for Blue Reflection.
And that's Mike Elwoods.
The next one I'm going to come back to, and this is Chilean Fish Market, 1/120th of a second, f2, a grab shot with an iPhone that represents a moment, I'm assuming, while someone was on holiday, I'm guessing, but not particularly or especially successful one. It's rather, I find it rather too busy, and the colors jar for me somewhat, and there are distractions around. The green bowl at the front takes your eye, and also masks what the chap is doing with the knife, and that yellow plastic chicken or whatever it is that's hanging down also interferes with the shot, interferes with the somewhat with the head of the fish that the chap is showing up to show us. So I'm thinking overall it might have been better if it had been cropped so that the guy on the left actually wasn't even in the shot itself, and it was more of a square format. So unfortunately it doesn't really quite succeed because there's just a bit too much going on. You've got every color under the sun there, all the primary colors going on. So I'm just giving that one 13 points.
And that's Graham's.
Then we come on to the last one, isn't it, in the list?
It is the last one on the list, yes. Okay,
which happens also to be one that I'm giving 17 points to. It's a lovely shot of autumn at the boathouse, 1/200th of a second at f11, ISO 800. And again, I'm assuming why handheld, if it is handheld, handheld because it's shot at 800 ISO. But it's a really nice shot. I mean, it's a lovely scene of autumn colors and an almost still lake with those beautiful reflections. It would have scored higher if perhaps those colors had been brought out a little bit more. Because I did find them on my screen. They do appear a little bit dull. And in terms of the composition, I think it might have been improved, and I'll show you what I mean, if we just lost a little bit of that foreground. Don't want to lose too much because I like the colors in the water. But it's a lovely sharp shot with some lovely colors. So that's all I've done to try to improve it, just lose a little bit what I feel like is just a bit too much of the lake in the foreground. And I've just tweaked those colors ever so slightly to try and bring them out a little bit better. So it's a really nice shot. But because of those, I felt like it needed that bit of extra work doing to it. I've given that one 17 points. I do like it.
Sorry, that's Chris Calders, and I do believe that Chris he's only actually just bought a PC. He hasn't joined us on Zoom yet, but he has joined us before.
Right.
He doesn't do any editing whatsoever.
Right.
Literally SD card, shot in JPEG, to the printers, gets it printed.
Right. Right.
So,
okay, where's the nice
no
shot?
cropping, anything. So we're
Very,
getting
very
there
nice
with
shot.
him.
Okay.
We got him to enter, so that's a good start. Now we've just got to get him to editing.
Right, so the next one is number 2, Pop, which is intriguing. I had to look at this quite a few times, keep going back to it, and it was I think my second time of studying it that I could really make out the face and the glasses, and that someone's being doused in pop. This was taken at this is 1/8000th of a second, f2.8, and it needed it obviously to stop the motion. And I like the fact that it's not entirely black and white, and it illustrates the properties of water that's got bubbles in it, whether it be oxygen or CO2, because it tends to wrap around objects. If you've washed your hands in bubbly water, then you'll know what I mean. It tends to grip onto your hands. It's well exposed as well, and it's quite intriguing. I'd like to think, for the sake of the poor person that's being doused, that they didn't have too many attempts at producing this, but it's quite nicely, quite well done, and I find it quite intriguing, which is why I thought I'd give it 17 points.
Thank you. That's one of mine. And just to put your mind at rest, the actual dousing was done in Photoshop. It wasn't done in real life. It was actually a balloon pop that's used a vector mask and all sorts of other masks onto a different photo of my daughter's face. So it actually warps the balloon pop round her face to make it look like her face is in the water. It's not actually there.
Very clever. And in that case, well done. So yeah, you've earned your 17 points there.
Yeah, it did take some work, but yeah, it's one of those things where you can make up a vector mask, and then it transposes the water droplets over the top to make it look like it's on the face. But yeah.
Okay. Right.
Rob,
Yeah.
on that picture there, top right hand corner, did you get a bit of the water onto the lens?
I shouldn't have done, because I was on a 70 to 200 and I was about 10 foot away, because there was no way I was bursting balloons near that lens. That smudging sort of thing. And
I did notice that, but I thought, well, you can forgive that for the effort that you've gone into.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that was, and it was one of those horrible ones that when I actually looked through the images again tonight, because obviously I get access to all the images and I'm the only one that does. When I looked through it, I looked at that and I went, shit, I missed that. I'd have tidied that up if I hadn't done it. I don't know how I'd have managed at the bottom left hand, but the top right hand, I could have definitely tidied that bit up there. The bottom left hand, there's too much there. That would have taken me about 3 years to tidy up. But there's quite a bit. I think that took me about 5 hours in front of Photoshop to get that one like that.
Gosh. Right. Okay. You're forgiven. Right.
Thank you.
Okay. The next one, number 11, Flamborough Sunrise. Do you know, I'd be interested to know what you think. My first thought, I mean, I've checked this and it's absolutely spot on, but my first thought was that horizon was wonky. So it must be something of an optical illusion. To me, it looks like
it's because the right-hand side of the horizon drops
off,
following the bottom of the cliff.
Yeah. But it's a very nice composition, and a lot of effort has gone into this and finding the right spot. The move to black and white really emphasizes the wonderful textures and patterns in the rocks. There's a but coming, and that is, I can't help thinking, well, I would like to have seen it in color, especially since the title is about sunrise. And I can't help but feel that it might have been better to try and get at the lovely detail that you've got in the rocks and the patterns in a color image. Because I think it loses something as a sunrise image, the fact that it's in black and white. The other reason why it didn't score higher is the fact that it is rather grainy, but worse still, I'm afraid there are dust spots on the sensor, and also I think there must be water droplets on the lens, because when you go into the sky, you can see artifacts in the sky. So just a little bit of extra care was needed really to get this higher score. But I'm giving it 17 points.
And that was Dave's. So Dave, clean your sensor. Dave uses a Sony A7 Mark III. So yeah, I mean, it's with a size sensor on them, it will pick up the tiniest little bit, won't it?
Right.
Because they're like 48 megapixel or something like that.
Right, then we move on to Ren from the bridge at dusk, Lofoten. A classic, a lovely classic nighttime shot of the fishing village. Not that a view of the village that I've seen that often. Really competently executed, and exposure is spot on, because you're trying to represent a shot of a really cold mountain and warm streetlights. Classic combination, and works really nicely. So it's really well done. 18 seconds, f11, ISO 100. So 17 points for that one.
And that's Tim's.
Then we come on to Adriana's first birthday portrait. 1/125th of a second, f3.2. This is tonight's second R moment. A really nice portrait of Adriana that works well, I think, in black and white. The props really help to make the composition and add a bit of interest. And the backdrop's nicely out of focus with a f3.2 aperture. There's light coming in from the side that's possibly a little bit strong on the side of her head, but that's a minor point. But the only thing that sort of let this shot down, and why again it didn't score higher, is on closer inspection on the shot, there's some funny processing going on in the cropping of the image, particularly on the left-hand side, and also at the top of the image. And I'm not quite sure what's caused it. I don't really want to. I could try zooming in so you can see it, or you can just take my word for it. Do you want me to try and zoom in?
If you can, it would be helpful, yeah.
Can you see the band? There's a band at the top.
Yeah.
And also on the left. Can you just catch? It's very very narrow. It's just on the left.
More careful with the editing, I think.
So that's another one for 17 points. That's Adriana.
Very nice, though.
Yeah. That's Dave's.
So they're all the ones that got 17 points. So now
we should have 2 left, I believe.
No, there's 3 left.
3.
I've screwed up here.
Yeah.
What's it like down there? I do like this. I do like this shot. It really cheered me up during a long day in my study, and while I've been wrestling with developers to try and move my website to a different host, and I was feeling pretty cheesed off because I was having problems. And I came back to this image a few times, and I really do like it. for a number of reasons, really. The composition, I think, works really well within a narrow frame, which obviously suits this particular subject. The main giraffe's neck emerges from the corner of the frame, but it's the one below that also really makes this picture stand out. The second giraffe that could so easily have been out of focus, but it's taken f9 at 1/60th of a second, ISO 200, and helps to make the shot placed against exposed well, placed against that white cloud. Without it, it wouldn't be anything like as good a shot. So I really do like it. It really cheers me up. And there's good detail as well. There's good detail if you notice you got a bit of saliva and also those whiskers on the chin of that giraffe. Yeah, I really like it. And I wanted to make sure there was a non-landscape shot in the top 3 as well. But this is this one is a worthy winner of 18 points. So in second place with 19 points is this fabulous shot of seagrass at a place in Lofoten, Fredvang Bridge. It's a cracker. It really is a cracker. A wonderful landscape shot, and almost mirror still lake, and a nice mountain with a pointy top. If you're going to take a picture of a mountain, in my mind, it's got to have a nice pointy top, and this one obliges. And that bridge also really helps to make it. It's a lovely scene, smashing. Naturally, almost monochrome, fully monochrome image, but lifted with that splash of brown seagrass in the foreground to give it a bit of extra punch and interest, and front to back sharpness, beautifully exposed. It's a cracker. 19 points.
Thank you.
Can you just, is there somebody on the left hand bit of above the water? Is that somebody there, or is it just detail in the rock behind? Just to your left there.
No, it's not. It's not. It's not. I zoomed in on that to see what it was, but it's not a person.
No.
Right.
Tim, you'll know.
Everybody's standing behind me.
Yeah. No, I didn't know if there was somebody walking around there. That was all.
Right. No, it caught my eye, and I zoomed in on it. It's not a person or anything. So yeah, Tim, you've done it again. Look, how can I not give that one 20 points? What a fabulous shot. I just looked at it and went, wow. I wish I could have been there. Let me see if I can get my details.
Do you know Paul Gallagher? You know of him?
Yeah.
Paul Gallagher, you know, the monochrome photographer?
Yeah.
His website has a picture on where he decided that he didn't like the big rock in the foreground. So he moved 3 steps to the right. Yeah.
Okay.
And took a picture of the same rocks.
Yeah.
Exactly the same rocks as that, but without any detail in the foreground. And he's now selling that for like 150 quid on his website.
Right.
Because he's Paul Gallagher.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it is quite a dominant foreground interest, but it's such a lovely rock. It's worth it.
Yeah, it was the lichens and stuff like that. You know?
The exposure's spot on. It's tack sharp. There's lovely detail, an interesting sky, some lovely colours as well coming into play. The only thing that I wondered, and it might not have improved it at all, but I wondered if you could have got higher up, so that you saw the water going along the front.
Separation between the big rock and the
separation. Yeah. That's the only thing that I wondered.
No, I didn't have what's his name's steps with me. Who's the British photographer who?
Charlie Waite.
Charlie Waite. I didn't have Charlie's steps.
Yeah.
You know, I was sort of up in.
Yeah. Or Ansel Adams's cut van part behind you.
Yeah.
No,
I just told the people making my van that I want a set of steps up the back and a platform on the top.
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, I think it's fabulous. I mean, you had a choice about the length of exposure, and I just think it's spot on in terms of the flow of water that you got.
Well,
1.8 seconds just did the trick at f16 and ISO 50. So
you mentioned it earlier on when you were commenting about one of the other images. I'm not sure whether it was one of mine or not. That if your camera's on a tripod, then the exposure time is pretty much whatever you need it to be.
Yeah.
So I needed everything to be in focus from the back, so it was. And then I just said, right, okay, what ISO do I need to set the exposure at about a second? And it all just worked, you know.
Yeah, fantastic.
Well, thank you very much.
Well done, Tim.
Great picture, Tim. Great picture.
Yeah, great stuff.
Thank you. It is in my book, if you haven't bought the book yet.
Well, okay, so that wraps up the scoring. I hope I haven't been too brutal with folk, but the whole point was to try and pick out elements that I thought might actually help to improve, in my humble opinion, help to improve images and what I saw. And like I said, well, I hope I haven't offended anybody, but thank you for letting me go through them.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you
very much, Andrew.
That's interesting. Very good.
Rob, can I just ask who was the giraffe image got 18?
Stephen Ruddock's, I think. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah,
that's the one. Thank you.
Has anyone got any questions?
Andrew, just for interest, the reflections you thought might be Canary Wharf is actually the Hiscox Insurance Building in the centre of York.
Okay.
Is that down there, Stonebow, Graham?
Yeah, and it does have some really interesting reflections.
Right.
Completely a sort of wavy glass front the whole way down one side.
Right.
And the thing that looks like the Burj Khalifa in the middle, I haven't got a clue what that is. I don't know how it's
well, yeah, I did.
Weird.
Funny enough, I did wonder about that because I thought initially I thought, was that the Shard?
Yes.
Because I just saw this tall building.
I can't work out what's causing that because if you go there,
this here,
I don't know what that is. And I took a number of pictures, and they come out very different each time.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting, actually.
Yeah, well, I realised it couldn't be the Shard. That's why I thought, well, it can't be there in London. Maybe it's Canary Wharf. And I thought, well, actually, if it's locked down, the chances are that you're not going to be down in London.
The closest place I can get to.
Yeah, quite. Yeah, but the interesting thing is, I spent the day with a professional photographer some years ago, called Mike Curry, and he spends a lot of his time in Canary Wharf. He gets permission to take photographs around there, and he, instead of concentrating on the reflections and the buildings themselves, he takes pictures of the effect that the buildings have on the reflections in the water. And he's made it into the landscape photography, Charlie Waite's landscape photography book a number of times with his intriguing images of just water reflections, the play of light on the water and the colors in the water. So really interesting. Look him up if you get a chance.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Andrew. As usual, excellent criticism and fair marks. So thank you very much, and congratulations to Tim for almost a clean sweep, but not quite.
Thank you.
Well done.
We do actually have a meeting next week, which is departure from our fortnightly meetings. Next week, we've got a chap called David Mason, who's coming to talk about street photography. So we look forward to that. And once again, thank you very much, Andrew.
Pleasure. Thank you.
We hope to see you next year when we've got out a bit more.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'd be delighted. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much.
Shall I close this? Shall I close this down then?
Unless anybody wants to say anything more.
I've just had a message from my pal that was meant to be joining tonight, and he was still at work, so hopefully he'll join it next time.
All right, I'll send you through a link when I do it at weekend.
Yeah. All right. Cheers, Rob.
All right, no worries. Right.
Tomorrow, Graham.
See you later all.
Yeah,
Cheers.
Bye.
Everybody.
Yeah.